The whole point of Terrifier is to terrify, specifically with gallons and gallons of fake blood and gore. It's all macabre movie magic, not meant to be taken seriously, but even the series' biggest fans admit these moments crossed a line.
Slasher villains often stand out among horror characters because they firmly put a face to the madness. And few screen killers in recent memory have committed to cementing a more haunting image than that of Art the Clown.
Oh my god, you're never gonna believe what I just heard on the radio.
You've seen your killer clowns, whether from the far reaches of space or the murky depths of Maine. But you've never seen a clown quite like Art. Even if you've never seen his movies, you've likely seen his demented face. Art was initially a through-line antagonist in director Damien Leone's 2013 anthology flick All Hallows' Eve, which itself was composed of the filmmaker's short films from years past.
Please stop.
Initially played by Mike Gianelli, it was David Howard Thornton who would secure the pantomime killer's legacy in 2016's Terrifier. Where All Hallows' Eve was a sort of test run for the character, Terrifier was where the clown prince of grime made himself known. And now Art has continued his reign of terror with Terrifier 2, a sequel that has been eliciting the kind of bodily reactions that even the most jaded horror fanatic couldn't have imagined. Terrifier 2 has been making headlines for a number of reasons. First, it collected over $1.2 million at the box office in one weekend, but it's the other headlines where things get messy. According to a report from USA Today, it appears that the film is too extreme for some people, prompting them to either faint or resort to vomiting. Even an ambulance had been called to one theater. It got to the point where Steve Barton, the film's executive producer, had to tweet out a viewer discretion warning. Most horror movies wish they could get this kind of hyperbole about how scary or gross the experience is, but Terrifier 2 is one that actively deserves it. Saw used to be the gory Halloween splatterfest folks went to see around this time of year, but even Jigsaw would feel compelled to tell Art to chill. Terrifier 2 is an ugly movie born in blood that somehow slithered onto the screens of an AMC theater near you. It's probably the closest you'll come to a contemporary horror film capturing the sickeningly sadistic glee of the grindhouse days. You've seen violent movies before, but this will seriously test your limits.
Stay back. Stop, please, stop. Stay away from me. No, please.
The first Terrifier features one of the most graphic kills you'll see in any horror movie. Art has one of his victims hung upside down with their legs spread open, and he proceeds to saw them in half. From groin to brain, you witness every gory detail. If that was too much to stomach for you, skip the sequel. Terrifier 2 finds more horrifically creative methods of mutilating the human body, discovering new and unfathomable limits. The makeup effects in Terrifier 2 are so unnerving because the kills themselves are often agonizingly slow. Art revels in the thrill of the kill and forces you to experience it with him. Director Damien Leone places a heavy emphasis on practical effects, and they're astounding stuff. The incredibly talented makeup effects team deserves all the praise in the world for pulling these scenes off. It would appear, however, that Leone himself has mixed feelings on the reports emanating from his film. Speaking with Entertainment Weekly, Leone says that while he was happy that Terrifier 2 was doing well, he's not into the idea of his movie requiring the need of paramedics at movie theaters. He said, "Listen, I would have loved to have a couple of walkouts. I think that's sort of a badge of honor because it is an intense movie. I don't want people fainting, getting hurt during the movie, but it's surreal. Here's the thing, it's called Terrifier 2. You should probably see Terrifier 1 before you jump into this one. If you see Terrifier 1, you know what you're getting into." It's easy to see where Leone is coming from. It doesn't help if you walk into a sequel not knowing that its predecessor already pushed the limits of gore in horror movies. But at the same time, both Terrifier films are a provocative spectacle, and Leone knows this. It's difficult for people to look at the reports and not want to go see what everyone is talking about. Those who aren't even familiar with the first Terrifier will want to see if its sequel lives up to the headlines. That's the nature of word of mouth, for better or worse. Even if you've never seen a Friday the 13th or a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, you're likely familiar with Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger through cultural osmosis alone. The folks who have never even heard of Art the Clown are rapidly becoming acquainted with the slasher's existence.
Aww.
It all comes down to the look. Art checks all of the boxes regarding creepy killer clowns. He's got the white makeup, the floppy shoes, the face paint, and a jaunty disposition. Thornton is a force of nature in the costume, utilizing his expressive face to conjure an ordinary slasher into something uniquely memorable. Despite checking all of the clown prerequisites, the pantomime slasher never speaks. Even when he laughs, Art doesn't actually make a sound. It's Thornton's menacing grimace that ties it all together. While Terrifier 2 has been making the rounds for its graphic kills and the reactions that followed, it's also worth noting that the horror sequel has also been garnering positive reception from both critics and genre fans. The film's target audience actually likes the movie. A common criticism lobbied against the original Terrifier was its lack of a story, coupled with its acts of misogynistic brutality. For 85 minutes, Art hacks and slashes his way through his victims with little to tie it all together. Terrifier 2, however, switches things up with the inclusion of Lauren Lavera's Sienna, a teenage girl who was actually propped up as a formidable challenger to Art's reign of terror. The film follows her story just as much as Art's, adding a supernatural intrigue as to what the demon clown could possibly be. Lavera's performance is a massive step up from whatever the cast of Terrifier was doing the first time around, and it actually gives you someone to follow in the midst of all the carnage. Since slasher flicks are rarely as long as Terrifier 2, the film has this disorientating effect where it makes you feel like you're slowly losing your mind as the depravity on screen unfolds. It's the kind of movie where every reaction, anger, disgust, and amazement, is an equally valid response. You likely won't see another movie as dedicated to making you squirm in your seat than Leone's demented horror show. Terrifier 2 may or may not be a movie you like, but one thing's for sure, you will never forget it. Art the Clown performed some truly unspeakable acts in Terrifier 2, but one unfilmed scene was too much for the director to put to camera. Terrifier 2 is a wholeheartedly better film than its predecessor, as it features Lauren Lavera's Sienna, an excellent new addition to the Scream Queen roster. But the truth is that Art and his gory reign of terror struck a nerve. That's the whole reason the film truly caught on with general audiences. They had to see what the fuss was all about. When it came to bringing these stunning kills to the screen, there was one that even Leone had to put a pin in before it went too far. Right before Art chases Sienna through the Terrifier haunted house, he has to dispense those responsible for her ride. Jeff steps outside of the car to drain the lizard, and instead drains just about everything else in his body. Art pulls a nasty sneak attack by stabbing him directly in his nether regions multiple times. You get a harrowing close-up of the blade making contact too. In a hilarious bit of irony, Jeff is wearing a t-shirt that says, "Just the tip, I promise," while all of this is going down. In an interview with Variety, Leone talks about how the already brutal dismemberment could have been much worse. Leone said, "We had conversations of things he could do once he took the guy's off. We explored those and joked about it, but then we said, no, that's way too far, that's too distasteful. What else could Leone possibly think to do with Art?" As it turns out, he nearly took the stabbing a step further by giving into his clownish nature. Leone offered a suggestion, possibly making a balloon animal out of it or something like that, but we absolutely can't do that. It was actually Art the Clown actor Dave's suggestion. We're always trying to one-up each other and come up with sick things, but that was too far for me. Given that Terrifier 2 was already bordering on a 2.5-hour runtime, which is unheard of for a slasher flick, it really wouldn't have made a difference, but it's easy to see where they had to draw a line. If anything, the balloon gag would have worked with Art's ability to make you laugh, while committing some of the most heinous assaults on the human body you'll see in any recent horror movie. Once the shock of what's happening wears off, you almost find yourself laughing at the sheer lengths this killer goes to when it comes to making his unfortunate victims suffer. After all, the bedroom kill earlier in the film goes on for a shockingly long time, as Art flays Allie beyond belief. After the scalping, limb severing, and eye slicing, she's still alive. Then, as if he didn't do enough already, Art rushes back into the room with a bottle of bleach and a container of sodium, literally rubbing salt on the gaping wound. After a 3-minute kill like that, whatever insanity Leone and Thornton have in store would feel right in line. Art is the kind of slasher where, if he catches you in his sights, you're likely already dead. When it comes to his brand of kills, he makes what Pennywise does look merciful by comparison.
You think that guy's still out there?
What's up with you and this clown all of a sudden? You're like obsessed.
Where Terrifier 2 succeeds in being a vastly improved sequel in terms of its story and characters, the major attraction that everyone is talking about is director Damien Leone's astounding practical gore effects. The 2.5-hour slasher epic is an unabashedly graphic ode to the era of grindhouse cinema and doesn't hold back. Some of the effects were so gruesome, however, that it nearly made one of its actors sick, although it's probably not quite what you're expecting. As it turns out, Chris Jericho is a fan of horror movies, specifically Terrifier. The AEW wrestler had stumbled upon the first film while scrolling through Netflix years ago, and it blew him away. He told Screen Rant, "It was the best horror movie I think I'd seen in about 20 years, with what I consider to be the next iconic serial killer, which we also haven't had in horror movies for 25 years. In wanting to be a part of the movie, director Damien Leone found a brief role for Jericho as Burke, a security guard of the Miles County Psychiatric Hospital, who can be seen in the film's mid-credits stinger. In the scene, Jericho has to munch on a plate of this Halloween-themed gelatin display that nearly made him vomit. I think it was a kind of custard with some kind of plastic candy, and I had to eat like 5 of them, and they were cold and they were gelatinous, and it was really kind of getting to me. It was really gross. And I remember Damien was like, "Can you just eat one more?" And I was like, "Dude, I'll eat one more and then that's it. Because I'm gonna fucking puke if I have to do another one of these." Of all of the effects to make people sick in Terrifier 2, this is the last one you would think would cause a reaction. But the longer you look at the zombie platter, the more it makes sense. No one would call this plate of slime appetizing. In an interview with Variety, Leone talked about how when making the Terrifier movies, he wanted to make something that captured the sick imagination of horror folks. What's gonna get people talking once they leave our movie? We can show things they would never show in a Hollywood slasher. When you look at all of the effects that make up Terrifier 2, the zombie platter seems tame by comparison. Jericho is the only actor in the cast besides David Howard Thornton as Art who has to indulge in devouring anything close to body parts. But somehow Leone is able to manipulate us into making it feel more disgusting than it would under any other circumstance. Whether it be the makeup crew or the actors themselves, everyone involved with Terrifier 2 has some sort of experience with Art's grotesque brutality. Amid the reports of people vomiting during screenings, it's pretty funny that the only reason someone behind the camera nearly lost their lunch was due to an unappetizing plate of monster jello. Was Terrifier 2's original ending so disturbing that even its director said, "too much"? Or is there a more innocent reason behind the ending being changed? Over the span of 2.5 hours, which is usually unheard of for a slasher flick, Art torments a teenage girl named Sienna, who shares a mysterious connection with the demon clown, along with all of her friends and family. Around the time that we reach the film's gory climax at the Terrifier haunted attraction, you're waiting for Sienna to finally give Art a taste of his own medicine, and boy does she let him have it. The demonic little pale girl walks away with Art's decapitated melon, leaving room open for a sequel. But the true final moments of Terrifier 2 have something different in mind. In the film's mid-credits scene, we see a security guard, played by wrestler Chris Jericho, and a nurse working the graveyard shift on Halloween night at the Miles County Psychiatric Hospital. While they converse, the disfigured Victoria Hayes, Art's final victim from the first film, starts profusely bleeding in her room. When the nurse goes to check on her demented laughter, she discovers a horrifying sight, as Victoria has given birth to Art's head. As bonkers as this is, the ending looked entirely different at one point. In an interview with ComingSoon.net, Jericho talks about how they had to retool the ending they actually shot because a recent horror flick beat them to the punch. That scene was actually a lot longer, which led to the actual ending of the movie. Another horror movie came out in the same time frame over the last year that had the same ending, so we had to recut it and reshoot it. So it was actually a longer scene than that. But it did seem odd that Jericho just kind of comes and goes. The AEW wrestler is a massive fan of this franchise. He doesn't even rush to come to check out Victoria's demon spawn. There's something that feels incomplete after spending that whole scene with him at the front desk, only to not give his character any sort of reason for being there. Jericho was vague when talking about the movie that made Terrifier 2 cut the intended finale, but director Damien Leone gave a very strong hint as to what it could be. While doing a Reddit AMA, Leone was asked to clarify Jericho's statements. While he didn't outright say the exact movie that mirrored his original ending, Leone name-dropping the director of the project made it much easier to connect the dots. He said, "They didn't steal our idea. We just happen to have the same one. It may or may not have had something to do with a recent James Wan film." You heard that correctly. Leone has all but confirmed that the original ending to Terrifier 2 would have closely resembled that of James Wan's Malignant. Baby Art is by no means a bad conclusion, but it's difficult to think of losing the demon clown going full Gabriel. Leone didn't elaborate on how closely the two films' endings were. Going off of how Wan's film concluded, however, you have to wonder if Art instead sprouted in the back of Victoria's head before going on a destructive killing spree throughout the asylum. It's easy to see why Leone went in a different direction, though. Terrifier 2 is its own grimy beast of a grindhouse flick.
Is that bad?
Let's just say her face doesn't stimulate one's appetite.
Folks will remember the grotesque mutilations as an extension of art, but Malignant is also its own thing. In the span of a year, Gabriel has been embraced as a figurehead of the horror community. There's truly no separating the parasitic killer from that incredible police station rampage. With that said, it would be very interesting to see what Leone exactly had in mind for Art's final impression with whatever footage still exists. The horrifying clown from the Terrifier films causes a lot of violence on screen, but did you know the costume alone almost got a man shot behind the scenes, and cops were called a second time too? While Terrifier wasn't as well realized a film as its sequel, the makeshift visual effects, most of which were crafted by director Damien Leone himself, were undeniably impressive. However, one of the biggest issues with using practical visual effects while shooting a low-budget independent slasher is that you will frequently upset unwitting members of the public. Somewhat unsurprisingly, that's exactly what happened with both Terrifier films.
I didn't mean to frighten you, dear.
Speaking to Smash or Pass indie filmmaking, Thornton recalled how one scene in particular almost got him shot by police. The $35,000 production was shooting in Trenton, New Jersey, when things took a turn. As the actor recalled, there were two ladies arguing under the window of where I got my makeup on. I went over to watch the argument while they were filming a scene on set. Forgetting how I looked, they looked up and saw this blood-covered clown looking down at them and ran off screaming. Thornton went on to recount how half an hour later, Leone and producer Phil Falcone asked him to come outside, where he was greeted by over a dozen police officers in full riot gear. He explained that the area they were shooting in was not particularly safe, and that the women he'd seen earlier called the cops to report a bloody clown. Luckily, his explanation saved Thornton from a bullet, as he told the outlet. They laughed their butts off when I came out, and told me that I better be glad that I did not come out before my director and producer did, or that I would have been shot on sight. Thankfully, nothing as horrific as an actual shooting happened on this specific occasion. As Thornton went on to explain, he actually ended up taking pictures with the officers, though some kept their distance due to their own personal fear of clowns. Interestingly enough, it wouldn't be the last time the police were called to a Terrifier set. In fact, having the cops show up to set seems to have become an occupational hazard of Leone's brand of indie slasher filmmaking. During an interview at Creep IECon 2023, Thornton recalled how during filming for the laundromat scene in Terrifier 2, he once again found himself face-to-face with the New Jersey police. He explained, "I'm sitting there naked, covered in blood, and the cops said, 'We hear there was a bloody clown that came in here.' And I'm like, 'Hi, it was me.'" At least on this occasion, Thornton wasn't confronted with an entire riot squad ready to shoot, though he did face the uncomfortable situation of needing to reassure cops while wearing nothing but a newspaper. If anything, these reactions from unsuspecting passersby just legitimize the horrifying nature of a figure like Art the Clown. The original Terrifier came out around the time that the United States was experiencing a spree of creepy clown sightings. In fact, Rolling Stone published an article chronicling this phenomenon just weeks before the first film came out.
It's not surprising that Terrifier 3 is making people sick in the same way that Terrifier 2 did back in 2022. But is it bringing people to the breaking point even faster than before? This time around, Art is rampaging at Christmas time, and if you thought that the spirit of the season would tone things down a bit, you were gravely mistaken. According to Lad Bible, at the UK premiere of the film, 9 people walked out of the screening during the opening scene alone, and at least one person threw up.
That is so messed up!
Representatives for the film later confirmed that there were 11 total walkouts, in addition to the person who got sick. Director Damien Leone took to X and addressed the situation, saying, "I did personally witness some crazy stuff at this UK screening." These are not the first reports of the film's over-the-top gore. Actor David Howard Thornton, who portrays Art the Clown, was nearly sick over one scene he had to film for Terrifier 3. Leone tweeted at the time, "Can honestly say we just filmed one of the most insanely horrific scenes of the Terrifier franchise, and you'll never believe who couldn't handle it on set." Thornton later admitted that it was him, and added in a thread, "This was the first kill that almost made me vom. That's a first." Those are the people making the movie. For certain uninitiated audience members, the sheer amount of gore in an unrated slasher such as this is going to come as a surprise. Without getting into spoilers, we can confirm that the opening minutes of the film are rather disturbing. Hardened fans of horror, and this franchise in particular, are likely anticipating that. Casual viewers, on the other hand, need to be prepared for what they're about to get into. Leone previously warned us in an interview with The Independent, "If you thought Art the Clown's reign of terror in Part 2 was extreme, you haven't seen anything yet."
You both know this isn't over.
This is why he avoided making a sequel with a major Hollywood studio after the success of Terrifier 2. He wanted to keep the franchise as gory as possible, and Hollywood studios weren't having it. As he told Lad Bible, "I got to meet with studios, like legit Hollywood studios, who wanted to make Terrifier 3. I knew they weren't going to let me make this movie based on the first pages. Like, that's how insane Terrifier 3 is. The official Terrifier 3 social media accounts recently posted an in-theater message that reads, "Warning, this film contains extreme violence and excessive gore. If you are feeling unwell, please find a member of staff. Staff trained in first aid are on site." Those involved in making and distributing the film are doing their best to prepare audiences for what's to come, which is not for the faint of heart. To that end, the reviews for the film have been largely positive, while also highlighting the extreme levels of gore. SlashFilm's own Jacob Hall gave Terrifier 3 a 7 out of 10 review out of Fantastic Fest, while also cautioning, "It's the gore that will test most viewers, fascinating some and sickening others." The walkouts are only going to further encourage the intended audience for this film. As Terrifier 2 proved, that audience is surprisingly large. At the same time, anyone who is merely curious as to what all of the fuss is about, these warnings should be taken seriously. It is just a movie, but it's one that is designed to test the limits of what viewers can endure.